You're watching Hellbent Holler live. What's up, everybody? It is a very special episode of Hellbent Holler Live. My name is Jesse. This is Joe. You get to see us on a Friday. We got our headphones on today.
It's weird, man. I know we don't usually rock the headphones. So
all right. So today we have a very special guest joining us for this Friday edition of Hellbent Holler Live. This is a good friend of ours and a researcher that we just adore and respect, and think that he's really bringing a lot of great stuff to the cryptid community. It's actually well thought out concepts, and I think this is actually the introduction to a new era of cryptozoology.
And this text message that Jesse sent me earlier sums it all up, because obviously she was doing the prep for the show while I was at the day job. And I just get a random text just out of the blue going, "This field needs Aaron badly." So
his name is Aaron Deese. He is part of Small Town Monsters, which is the biggest name in the game when it comes to cryptid documentaries and filmmaking. He's also the host of the Hey Strangeness podcast with his wife, Sarah. He lives in San Antonio, Texas. He's a cat guy like us.
But yet he's into Dogman.
He's into Dogman, of course.
He's done Texas Dogman Triangle.
Yep. He has written 2 books for STM Publishing. STM Publishing is the newest wing of Small Town Monsters. And he has written the Texas Dogman Triangle. And his most recent book is Hunting Grounds, Dogmen of the Lakes. And recently he was in the documentary that just released, that Joe and I are also in, from Small Town Monsters, Dogman Territory, Werewolves of the Land Between the Lakes. So without further ado, let's introduce our boy, Aaron Deese.
Hello.
Up, hello.
You guys just made my night. Can you write my resume? That was so nice. Thank you. Oh my gosh.
I see that you've got the orange background there.
Yeah, and the Hellbent Holler shirt on, man who knows fashion. So
I just took this out of the dryer. It's still a little damp, but I was like, I have to wear it. I have to. This is what I've been waiting for.
You got to be on brand when you're doing this.
All
right. Well, thank you for joining us tonight, Aaron. I'm super excited about this. Joe and I have been talking about this for a long time. We really wanted to get you on here. We've never had a guest on our show.
Never.
Joe and I tend to just
hog the spotlight all ourselves.
Suck all of the air out of every room. So
this is a huge honor. Thank you. From the moment you mentioned it to me, I was like, oh my gosh, this is going to be amazing. Thank you so much. No, I'm so happy to be here.
All right. Well, let's get started. So kind of tell us what your role is with Small Town Monsters, and kind of about how did you get to that point?
Yeah, that's a fun question. So my job title is content producer, but I do not a little bit of everything, but a bunch of a few things. I do a lot of research and script outlining. Heather Mosier and I work very closely on that together. I'll do pitches for new shows. My most recent successful project was UFOs Revisited, which is airing right now. I get to host that, so that's fun. I also get to host the live stream that we do every Thursday night. And actually, I'm looking at the comments. I see a lot of our regular viewers that come hang out with us on that stream. So just
Awesome.
hello to you guys. Great to see you all. I do a couple of podcasts for us. I produce The Lore You Know, which is hosted by, again, my good friend Heather Mosier. I also write, edit, produce, and created House of Monsters, which is a short form, episodic, kind of essay style presentation on specific monsters. And of course, I've had the opportunity to write 2 books on the Dogman phenomena. With your assistance, you two specifically, neither of those books would have been what they are without you. And both books do have a companion documentary. There's the Dogman Triangle, Werewolves in the Lone Star State, and Dogman Territory, Werewolves in the Land Between the Lakes. So, and I like to think the books and the documentaries do stand independent of each other, but they definitely are interwoven and helped inform each other. So, but as far as like getting to this spot, I, like a lot of folks, man, during the pandemic, I was bored, I was stir crazy, I was deeply depressed, and I needed a place to put my brain that wasn't, my apartment where I was living, working, and sleeping 24 hours a day. So, I got back into the paranormal, which is something I had always been interested in. And I picked out a few podcasts that I still really love. I stumbled across Small Town Monsters, and that immediately framed the whole way I started looking at this stuff and approaching this stuff, because I was so used to the mainstream cable channel presentation, the very sensationalized TikTok version of this stuff.
Mhm.
So when I ran across Seth and his crew, I was like, this is it. This is the stuff. This is what we need, and then I got into the social media community, ended up following you guys, ended up in some clubhouse rooms with you guys back in the day. I think that was where we first spoke.
Mhm.
Excuse me. And from there, it just became more and more of a hobby. It became a job I wasn't getting paid for. Then it became a part-time job. I was an editor-in-chief with Paranormality magazine for a little bit. Made the decision to leave that company to focus on other things. And, one day Seth called me up and was like, hey, would you like to work with us? And I said, yes, absolutely, please, I would. I just became a full-time stay-at-home dad, and it would be good to have something else to do when I'm not changing diapers. So that was about a year ago, actually. It'll be a year in about 2 weeks, and now I get to do cool stuff like this and hang out with you guys. That's the long version, I guess.
So you did all of this within a year. You have 2 books. You're in you're in this documentary, and then you're in other documentaries that they do, right?
This was all about 3 years from start to finish.
Okay.
The first book to where we are right now. And yeah, I got to appear in Chupacabra, which was directed by my good friend Eli Watson. I happen to have a copy right here. Available at shop.smalltownmonsters.com
Oh, good
and streaming on Prime Video. I'll just set this
There
over
you
here.
go.
It's going to take a while to get that back up. Excuse me. And then, yeah, I got to host UFOs Revisited, which we filmed back in February. That's airing right now. We've got some great folks in there. Micah Hanks, Katie Page, Ron Murphy, Seth Breedlove, Mark Matsky, Heather Mosier, are all in that show. So that's a really cool one. And yeah, I've kind of gotten to do little things. There's some upcoming productions that you'll probably see my face in, but, stuff's always going on in the background. So
That's awesome. And as a side note here, if you guys want to purchase any of Aaron's books, I have the link in the description below that'll take you to the Small Town Monsters website where you can purchase Texas Dogman Triangle and Hunting Grounds. So, Joe.
Yeah, it was weird because I was talking to somebody when I was talking about having Aaron on the show tonight, and I was like, he's like the Renaissance man of the cryptid world right now. Podcaster, author, documentary filmmaker, researcher. You just need to drop like a mixtape right now. You know what I'm saying? And like you got it all, man.
I did have a few too many beers one night before I stopped drinking, and because you just don't have time to do that when you have a baby. And I did maybe possibly write a 6-verse improvised Bigfoot rap. So who knows? Maybe one day that'll show up. I did mention
Jesse
Brandon
did a
Baylor.
Dogman rap, didn't you?
I
So
did a
you
Dogman
guys need to do collaboration albums. What
The
needs to
cryptid
happen now,
mixtape.
so.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
we'll get off mic on that.
And like I said, we didn't really prepare a lot of questions, man. I figured we just I mean, we're friends with you. I figured we would just kind of make this a pretty casual conversation.
Yeah.
We're crappy interviewers, but you're a great interviewee. So I guess it'll all kind of meet in the middle somewhere and kind of balance out. But so, and I've heard you talk about this with other people, but for those people that are out there that are not familiar with this, obviously you've had a pretty varied career with a lot of just paranormal topics and whatnot. Dogman, what was the incident, the experience that kind of got you down this weird Dogman road? Because a lot of us, have just all of a sudden we're just like, how did we get into this? It's not something we started off, intending to get involved with. So how did that journey start for you?
Yeah, that's such a fun story for me because, a lot of times you'll hear people say you don't choose the phenomenon, it chooses you. And I was kind of in that early period of getting back into this stuff because I was into it in high school and junior high and, read the Mothman Prophecies. That's the first book I ever purchased with my own money, actually, when I was like 14. So, it's always been in the periphery for me, but I was just sort of getting back into this. Sarah and I had launched our podcast and, we didn't have an update schedule. We still don't. We were just picking and choosing topics as we stumbled across them. And at the time we were living in Austin, but Sarah's from San Antonio. It's where we met, where we got married. And just Texas is such a strange place. And San Antonio in particular is saturated with weird stuff. So we were kind of just focusing on things that were around us. And I had just watched The Bray Road Beast by Small Town Monsters, immediately purchased and read The Beast of Bray Road by Linda Godfrey. And it was about 2 weeks later, and I sat down with a family member, someone I know very well, trust implicitly, would trust the guy with my life, would leave my son with him. Like I can't give anybody a higher trust than that, And I was like, yeah, man, I've really been getting into this stuff. The podcast is going well. I think we're going to do an episode about, werewolves or something. And he gets real serious. He puts his drink down and he looks at me and he goes, I saw something once. And this is a guy that owns businesses. He is an Afghanistan veteran. He's father to two very well-adjusted, well-educated kids, college guy. Like, this is not a guy that hangs out on Reddit or in the TikTok comments. Like, he doesn't have time for that stuff. And he gave me a description of what is a pretty atypical roadside Dogman sighting. And he gives this description that I'm like, point for point, this is the Beast of Bray Road, right down to the behavior, right down to the crouching and the upright stance, the holding roadkill. It's point for point. So I pull up the poster for The Bray Road Beast by Small Town Monsters, which I believe is illustrated by Sam Sheeran, great artist. And I was like, what does this look like? And I mean, he goes pale. The guy goes pale and he goes, that's basically what I saw, man. I mean, not exactly. This is an illustration, but this is really, really close. And, a few months go by, the book becomes a thing. We produce an episode for Hey Strangeness called The Texas Dogman Triangle that focused on that and two other sightings that had been documented by the NADP, formed a triangle of about 700 square miles. We know that wolves and wolf packs will occupy regions of about 700 square miles. That's in their range. And this is all pretty much rural Texas hill country. Austin is kind of down in the corner of it, but Austin itself, even for being a major city, there's a lot of green space. There's a lot of nature preserves. It's kind of one of their claims to fame, or was, until all the big companies moved in there and jacked up our rents. So
same thing happening here. So
right, yeah, we're experiencing the same
everywhere. So I didn't mean to go down that road, but I could complain about Texas for a while, but even though I love it. But anyway, we made the episode. It was fun. To date, it's still our most downloaded episode, even though it's like 3 years old at this point. And I keep doing research and I keep just running searches every now and again. And I'm like, oh, wait, there's another report over here. And oh, wait, there's a hill country folktale over here. And look, Lyle Blackburn did an entire episode on the Converse Wolfman. Why is no one talking about this? So I start making numbers and I realize there are like 27 Dogman reports in Texas that are already anecdotally documented, some of them with evidence. That number grew when I started swapping notes with you guys, because you put me in touch with a guy named Nick who lives down in Medina County. He also appears in the Dogman Triangle documentary. The eyewitness I mentioned a moment ago appears in the documentary on the phone. To date, his identity, his real name is anonymous. He goes by a pseudonym in that movie because, again, for all the reasons I mentioned earlier, he's not really interested in being known as a werewolf guy, So it just became more and more real for me. It started with a very personal thing, and then it spread across internet forums. And I was talking to people like you guys, John Gonzalez down at True Horror Stories of Texas, Michael Mays with the North American Wood Ape Conservancy. I tried to get as many people in Texas who specialized in strangeness as possible. And I was getting different reports and different stories from all of them. Some of them were documented elsewhere, some were documented on their own websites. But it just came to a point where I was like, there is a tangible recurring phenomenon in Texas involving these upright canids that goes back at least 100 years. And if you look at the fact that a lot of these communities where these reports are taking place were at one time European settlers, very often of German descent, it's interesting because we can trace that folklore back even further. But then that leads into a larger discussion about the pedigree of the werewolf, I suppose.
Exactly. And it's so weird because I think we all had this conversation in the bar at Monster Fest because we were just going, people think of Dogman, they think of it as being like a modern invention. We thought that exact same way. It's weird, obviously we were familiar with Linda Gottfried and her work and all of that. And I'm a folklorist, I'm familiar with the folklore, but then you almost think of them as being two separate things. There's that modern Dogman phenomenon, which to me seemed mostly like an internet invention, but then when you really start looking into this deeply, every region has got the same stuff you experienced in Texas. I mean, we've got a werewolf legend in our hometown, which nobody ever talks about. You get into Kentucky and it seems like every 20 miles, there's a different, werewolf based cryptid that's like through that area. So, and it's so cool. One of the things that kind of jumped out to me as you were telling that story is that Small Town Monsters has figured so importantly in your journey, and now you like work with them. That's kind of the cryptid equivalent of, was it Journey that they pulled up the guy out of the audience to sing with him and he ended up being the lead singer of the band? Yeah, that's the cryptid equivalent of that, man. So I think
feels
it's awesome.
like that. It feels like that sometimes, man. Like I keep expecting to wake up any day now. Like, all the group threads from STM are gone off my phone. I dreamed all of it.
And they're just like, sorry, Aaron, big mistake.
You're out, Aaron.
Yeah, that wasn't real. I do got to give
Josh Gates on instead. Sorry.
Yeah. We could get him. I do got to give a shout out to Dooster hanging out in the comments from Cryptids and Critters Paranormal. He also is in Dogman Territory, Werewolves and Lambs in the Lakes. So
good deal, the Dooster. But yeah, man, and it's interesting. It was interesting to kind of see how your opinion on the phenomenon kind of evolved as you did this. So that's how you got into it. Could you talk about how your thought process evolved on the whole thing? I mean, as you got into it and you became more immersed in it, and you actually spoke to these witnesses, how did that kind of change your thought process? And you were at point A, obviously, you get an introduction to this, a personal introduction to this by a friend of yours. And then how did that evolve to kind of where you are right now with it?
Yeah, I mean, I know just from conversations with you guys, I started kind of where I think you guys did. This is nonsense. There's some interesting folklore here, but this is a fictitious invention. This is like Slender Man or the Pale Crawler or one of those other internet legends that people are now giving us sightings on. And that's a whole nother conversation, but I don't think there's any validity to this. And then I watched The Bray Road Beast, and I read, The Beast of Bray Road, and then 2 more of Linda Godfrey's books. And then I went, like I said, hunting online, and it just became very evident to me that whether or not my opinion of this phenomena is that it's legitimate or not, there is a very sizable chunk of people who have experienced this, who will look you dead in the eye and say, yes, I saw what resembles to me a werewolf. And while the descriptions vary and there's varying sizes, different colors of eyes and things like that, there were enough commonalities that I was like, okay, why are all these people seeing the same thing? Why would they not just say, I think I saw a Bigfoot with pointy ears, which we do see a lot of Sasquatch reports where they go, yeah, it had a baboon-like face and something like that. We see that with Dogman reports a lot too. So of course there's the whole question of, are they being misidentified? Is there crossover here? And then I'll misquote a couple of other people, but it's hard enough to stomach the idea of one undiscovered, upright, 6 foot or more bipedal species. It's hard. As much as I think there is validity to that idea, and I believe the evidence supports that, it's hard to swallow on a broad scale. Now you're going to introduce a second one, and it's one that I've been seeing in movies since 1941. That's tough. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how I try to deconstruct it and disprove it, because these witnesses are experiencing it. And at the end of the day, my assessment of a phenomenon okay, I can debate whether or not something happened. I can debate if it happened, what it actually was. I can debate all number of things if I want to. Is this anomalous? Is it a recurring pattern? That's fine. The impact on the witness and their experience is not subject to my approval, conjecture, or debate. It simply is not. And once I settled on that, as far as the werewolf question goes, it was all kind of downhill from there. And it continues to be downhill for that reason.
I feel you. And it's weird because I've often thought that I wonder how much of a suppression of reporting takes place out there because of that Hollywood association. Just in the witnesses that we've talked to, and I'm sure you've experienced the same thing. Somebody sees a Bigfoot, it's like, you're going to think I'm crazy, but I've seen a Bigfoot. Somebody's seen a Dogman, and it's like, they really are just like, I'm not crazy, but I swear I saw a werewolf, and it's really hard for them to come forward and talk about that. Especially these people who, like you mentioned, don't really have a background. They're not really involved in this stuff. Bigfoot's so much more culturally prevalent. You see them on beef jerky commercials. It's everywhere like that. Dogman, there's still a huge portion of the American population that has no clue that there's basically werewolves being sighted in 21st century America. Mm-hmm. And you have these people that have these sightings, and I think that most of them don't ever come forward. Most of them don't ever speak. I mean, we've had people that have come to us with experiences that they've had, and then they just go, you know what? I just kind of want to put this behind me and forget about it and not talk about it. I'm going to basally just pretend it didn't happen.
Yeah, you just block it out.
And I think there's a lot of that goes on before those people ever make their way to us or to you, or any of the other handful of people that are seriously involved in this. So
yeah.
So what do you, Dogman, what do you think it is? If somebody put you on the spot, like I'm doing you right now, like,
that's intense.
How much time do we have? All right. Hey, Siri, start a timer for 41 minutes. Okay. No, I began of the opinion that this was, oh wait, she actually did it. Sorry. Hold on. Let me stop. When I need Siri to do something, it doesn't happen. But I started very much of the opinion that this was a cryptozoological phenomenon, specifically in the vein of the so-called Texas chupacabra, aka the Texas terror dog. That is a cryptid that we know is a mix of different canine species: Mexican red wolves, domestic dogs, coyotes, possibly foxes, sarcoptic mange, a little bit of other veterinary neglect, feeding on livestock and things like that. And we end up with this very ghastly appearance that we now call the Texas chupacabra because of the media. So my thinking was something similar is going on here, but instead of ending up with this ghastly kind of degraded canine form that we see in the Texas chupacabra, we sort of had the inverse. We have something that's a little bigger, a little more muscular, has the ability to walk on two legs for some reason. Why they would adapt to do that, I don't know. Most veterinary people that I've run this idea by think that it's probably not very likely, but they'll still kind of nod and go, okay, stop talking. I guess I get what you're saying. So my thinking was this is an adapted behavior, or this is some kind of a mutant or hybrid or genetic offshoot that for one reason or another, you roll enough dice, you're going to get snake eyes eventually, decided to walk on two legs. Don't know why. There was nothing really that I could point to support that idea as far as it happening in the wild, because we do see bipedal locomotion in domestic canines all the time. We know they can do it. It's a learned, adapted behavior. It's a trick. We give them a treat. It makes us laugh. Dogs will do that. They're capable of doing that. We see coyotes and foxes climb fences. Sometimes people will put pictures online and say, this is a Dogman. And I'm like, no, that's a coyote climbing a fence, but I stay out of the comments. But the problem with that is that so many of these reports bleed into what we can really only define as the supernatural realm. We're talking about people experiencing feelings of intense dread and panic, often before they even see these things. They feel a tangible presence, and then they have a sighting, or then they have an auditory encounter, or they find a footprint. We're seeing physical symptoms: anxiety, nausea, panic attacks, hyperventilation, loss of bodily functions, vomiting. Not fun, graceful, cool adventure in the woods stuff. Very unpleasant, deeply human, private stuff that these people are just immediately experiencing in the wake of these sightings. We're getting reports of strange clouds of mist that show up sometimes before, after, during these reports. We see it in the land between the lakes and in Texas. We get reports of them changing shape, sometimes rising from a bipedal stance to a quadrupedal one, or vice versa. I think I said that backwards. Rising from a quadrupedal stance to a bipedal one, or vice versa. And then we even get strange ones like the Gregton werewolf in Texas and the Michigan Dogman, where they're described as having a human-like body, but a distinctly wolf-like head. And we can go down any number of rabbit holes and say, okay, misidentified animal, guy in a mask, hallucination, whatever you want. Doesn't matter. The common denominators are all there. The witnesses are still reporting the same things. And if we look at some of these older cases, like the Land Between the Lakes, notorious alleged Land Between the Lakes massacre, like the Gregton werewolf I mentioned a moment ago, like the Defiance werewolf in Ohio, I'll just pull that one out of my back pocket. These stories originate before the internet. So the possibility of them overlapping and feeding into one another and creating one another, while not impossible, is highly less likely than it is today. You know, if all of these stories were popping up in the mid-2000s, I'd think, okay, well, the Defiance werewolf was first. Somebody in Texas heard about it. It ended up on this forum, ended up over here. That wasn't possible in the 50s, 60s, 70s. So, you know.
Yeah, the likelihood of copycat cases, like you call them, are just, nowadays with the internet age, things spread like that. You know, it's almost spreads like a virus. You know,
And they
one
kind of
person hears-
evolve too.
Yeah, they evolve over time. But no, we've experienced the exact same thing. That, you know, and then the other thing too is that when you speak to some of these witnesses, you know, some of these witnesses are so grudging about even coming forward and speaking to you. And these are not people that are, you know, again, with us, it's always, I saw a werewolf. This is what I saw. It's going to sound crazy, but I saw a werewolf. Nobody ever mentions Dogman. Nobody knows what Dogman is outside of like a few internet circles and, like, you know, some cryptid enthusiasts and stuff like that. But they, it's just odd that it's, like you said, you see so much commonality spread across such a large distance and such a just a vast amount of time. I mean, you look at some of the cases, you know, you go to like, and Heather Mosier and I talked about this on her podcast. You look at a lot of the familiarity, like the similarities between the black dog phenomenon in like Western Europe and like Dogman encounters right now. And I'm going, you know, people have been reporting the same stuff, the nausea, the mist, you know, the glowing eyes, you know, the supernatural aspects to this.
And it shows it's not a new phenomenon.
Yeah, it's not a new phenomenon at all. It's just, it's
Not
crazy.
new. Yeah, this idea, this motif. I'm not going to say, you know, it's the exact same thing. It's the same Dogman, because I don't know that. But the upright canine motif, this idea of a chimeric being that represents wolves and or dogs and mankind, goes back as far as ancient Mesopotamia. I'm going to look at the camera. Ancient Mesopotamia. We're talking Epic of Gilgamesh time frame. This is not a new thing. And then we have it in Egypt. We have it in Greece. We have similar versions in Mesoamerica, Africa, Asia. We're getting reports of modern Dogman encounters out of Australia now. So this is not a new thing at all. And that's not my opinion. That's not an idea I came up with. That's stuff that's been written down by historians that I got lucky enough to put in a book. So that alone is so striking to me. And then when you roll it over into the modern era and go, no, people are still seeing these things. I mean, I get chills when I think about it, because it really does transcend the idea in my mind of a physical versus a spiritual being. Like, there is something here that for one reason or another, we have considered significant enough to incorporate into our folklore, our beliefs, and our storytelling collectively as a species for as far back as we have documented. It's just a fact.
And even before that, it's just, you know, canines, wolves, dogs, you know, prehistorically, they were our greatest competitors. They were also pack hunters. And then they were our first and best ally in the animal kingdom. You know what I'm saying? They occupied such a huge part of like the culture of like, you know, prehistoric humanity. And then also now they also occupy such a singular position. And like you said, in the folklore aspect of it, whether that folklore is real or if it's just imaginary or whatnot, but it's just, you know, that canine figure always just features so predominantly in like so many different cultures at this point. So
it really is. Oh, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off. Go right ahead. So
No, I was just agreeing with
Yeah.
what you're saying. In a lot of ways, it really is tied to us and who we are as a species and our evolution as a society and a species. I'm not smart enough to say anything more about that than that, but we developed alongside canines in a lot of ways. And then there's this thing that pops up in the middle. Shout out to Martin Groves. Martin's in the comments.
Yeah, Martin's
our
in the
dude.
chat.
What's up, Martin, buddy? So, all right, champ, what else you got there? So,
Well, speaking of Martin Groves, Martin Groves, Martin Dewey, Mike Smith,
Daryl.
everybody was in the documentary that just came out. It's available on Amazon Prime right now.
And this book.
Yeah.
Man, merchandising
You
just
brought all
on
your
point here,
props.
man. I'm telling you. So,
Pile of stuff in here. Yeah.
Yeah, Dogman Territory. Let's talk a little bit about that and kind of the process of filming that documentary. And it was kind of, from our perspective, it was pretty electric for all of us to kind of come together in that space at the LBL. We were doing a lot of work there on the ground before we met up with you guys, but actually everybody coming together and talking about this topic and working on that documentary. And it was I want to know what was that process like for you? Did that, and also when you went to the LBL, did you have preconceived notions about what it was actually like there? And then how did that change when you actually got on the ground and actually got to these locations where these events happened?
Oh, that's a great question. Great question. I do see someone mention Matt Emsch in the comments. He is also in the book. I was able to speak with him as well. So it's a little bit of extra information, but it was very surreal because you go in and it's this beautiful, majestic place and you want nothing more than to just sit down and like take it all in. But you're on a production schedule. We did have kind of a truncated filming schedule for this one, and there were multiple projects being worked on. So, and then of course we linked up with you guys. We linked up with Martin and Daryl, the Deuster, Mike. So there was a lot happening all at once. At many points, we were conducting interviews in one room while Alex was down in the basement conducting interviews for Beyond the Trail. Seth was over here recording some stuff for Sasquatch on Earth. So there was just a lot happening all at once. And then I was also working on the book. It was kind of decided from the get-go that the film shoot would be before the book deadline in order to give me more information, more time, more interviews, and that was one of the challenges with this one is I'm not from Kentucky. I've spent a little bit of time in Tennessee. I found out while researching this book, I had distant relatives via a marriage connection to Daniel Boone in the land between the lakes while it was being established in the 1700s. So that was a pretty fun thing to find out. But beyond that, I didn't have people on the ground outside of, these folks. Of course, Elijah and Gabby Henderson. I always leave somebody off the list. It's nothing personal, but it was incredibly surreal. I mean, that's kind of the best way to put it. It was a lot of fun. It was very enjoyable. It was very much kind of a Marvel Avengers sort of moment for me because we were all there. And that one night that we all got together and went down to the massacre site, it was like the whole crew, Alex and Eli, everybody was there. But there were still these moments where we kind of stopped and it was quiet and, maybe the guys were filming B-roll. I don't really know. I was just trying to listen to what was going on. And I very distinctly several times, even with everything that was going on, even with being on this production crunch and trying to take notes and record voice memos while being on camera, that's a fun challenge. I was still like, this place is incredibly bizarre and strange. And I would need many, many months of uninterrupted research to comprehensively document what this place is like. And going in, that was my goal. I wanted to have the most comprehensive overview of the LBL as a paranormal hotspot possible, as comprehensive as possible with a focus on the Dogman phenomenon. And I very quickly realized that wasn't going to be possible. So it became more about the heavy focus on the Dogman phenomena, of course, but then also just documenting what the experience is like to be there, what it's like to stand in that place and be in dead silence one minute and then see a Black Hawk helicopter shooting over the next. That's not something you experience every day. So while you're standing in what looks like a bomb shelter that's got graffiti all over it and 6 inches of trash that dates back to the 1960s, according to the Pepsi can I took a picture of so I could look up the label later. So just wild stuff, man. It's such a bizarre place. As far as preconceived notions, I had watched y'all's LBL series front to back multiple times. So I had watched a lot of Elijah's stuff and Johnny's stuff over at Cryptid Studies Institute. Late Mr. Henderson, a lot of respect to him and that whole family. They're great people. I had done a lot of reading, looked at Mr. Nunnally's work. I, of course, had read, Martin Groves's work. So I did have an image in my mind of what to expect. And I didn't see anything I didn't expect, but nothing can prepare you to go to a place that's that weird, especially knowing all the history and knowing what people are saying about it, hearing about these reports that are taking place within the last few months. Gabby Henderson's encounter was in May of last year, and we were there in November.
Yeah.
So you're talking about an ongoing, persistent phenomenon, and you're standing right in the heart of it. I don't know if you can prepare for that.
And Aaron's a madman too, because he was jumping in the bunkers.
No, yeah.
We had
trying to dig through the floor.
We had just discovered that there was that hollow space in the one main one, and he grabs a rock and he's trying to dig into it and everything like that, man. So
I was like, man, this is my only chance. Like,
no, you were
never
in it,
come
man.
back here, so let's do it now.
Oh, we're gonna get you back there. We were talking about that if you're on your next book, if you touch upon the LBL, we ought to get you out for even like a 3-day weekend and take you out on like some field investigative work there in the night,
Oh, I'd like that.
Kind of take you in.
Yeah.
And it would be just us three, and it would be
check in.
You would be on our expedition like how we do.
Just go in on foot and kind of, because it's weird because you're right. There's still stuff going on in the LBL. Everybody's focused on that 82 event. And then now, to be honest with you, I think the Martin Groves, I never know what to call it with Martin Groves. It's not a sighting. It's not an experience. The attack that happened or whatever, that's almost eclipsed the 82, event story at this point.
Well, you got to look in another universe. If Mr. Groves had been the one to go to the gas station and give his story to Jan, Thompson or Roberts, I always mix her name up in my head, even though I wrote a book about it. That might be what kicked all of this stuff off. You got to figure, because it shows that in that same time frame, in that same 10-year period, we can trace that story back to witnesses that lived in the area as early as 1982. Mr. Groves had his encounter in the very early 90s. So in that same 10-year period, we have two extremely dramatic encounters, one of which was kept under wraps for a very long time. And Miss Heather Mosier was able to make contact with Martin. That's the reason we can have this conversation. And of course, his willingness to come forward and share what was a very personal and frightening encounter. You really have to wonder. You really have to wonder which story we might have been talking about first.
Yeah. And it's weird because we, Martin's a dear friend of ours. You can't meet Martin Groves without loving him, but it's just so, I don't even think he quite realizes how pivotal he is into all of this, because again, he was a reluctant witness. He wasn't beating down the doors trying to get a book deal or trying to do any of that. From what I understand, it took some coaxing to get him to come forward. And even now, and it's so weird because, he went through this traumatic experience, but you get to know him a little bit, and he's like a man on a mission now. It's like he's doing this to try to spread awareness that this stuff is taking place out there. The stuff's real, whatever it is, it's real. It's affecting people. And, so often in this, you get these second or third hand stories, or you get people who make these claims about their background that usually don't pan out.
Yeah.
Like we always say, Martin is who he says he is. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's not in debate. That's not in dispute. Yeah.
And Martin's a person whose sworn testimony could get your ass thrown in jail with his law.
And probably has on numerous occasions.
Exactly right. And so he's standing there telling you, and the fact that he was willing to put his credibility on the line. And it's so weird because we know so many people that have gone, I've heard all the stuff. I've heard what you guys have had to say, but it wasn't until I met Martin Groves and looked him in the eye and heard him speak on it that it really kind of struck home for me. It even happened like that with us.
Yeah.
We had we saw that thing on thermal in the LBL, and we had some other experiences and whatnot. But I remember when we first heard Martin Groves talk about his encounter.
We were actually at the Dogman conference in Paris, Tennessee
that Josh Turner put on. And
I looked over, so Martin was on stage and he was talking about his encounter and describing it in great detail. And I just look over at Joe. We're in the audience there, and I look over at Joe and I just say, oh my God, they're real. Like, they're real.
Yeah. And we were driving into the LBL that night, and we were going in, and we're going across the bridge. There's a full red moon in the sky. We're very quiet. And I just went, I'm just going to be honest with you. I'm a little bit more uncomfortable doing this than what I normally am. And Jesse's like, yeah, I know that story. When you hear him tell it, you've heard him tell it face to face, it strikes you deep.
Yeah.
And he's not the only one. He's the most well known, I think, at this point. But,
Mhm.
and I'm sure you've spoken to people like that before, that you listen to them and you just go, I just don't see what this person's lying to me. They're exhibiting
Yeah.
the signs of PTSD,
Yeah.
um, and I just, sometimes there's a lack of like physical evidence, although a lot of times there's some backing physical evidence that's out there. But you just get these people that you just go, I can't dismiss what they're telling me. Something happened.
Yeah.
Don't know what it is. Don't know what these things are, but something happened. Like you said, it's not our place to judge their experiences.
Yeah.
And it's just, I don't know. It's so compelling. It's just such for us, I started off as a Bigfoot guy. Jesse was on the paranormal, supernatural stuff, but Dogman is what really kind of just all of a sudden blew our, expanded our perspective, expanded our horizons, and made us kind of like really accept that there's a lot more weird stuff out there than maybe a few haunted houses and an 8-foot tall primate running around the woods. So
When you have to ask, there's kind of tiers of witness motivation. This person has something to gain. Maybe that's tier
mhm,
1. Okay. This person has nothing to gain, but maybe it would benefit them to get some attention. Tier 2. This person has nothing to gain at all. Number 3. Number 4 is this person has something to lose. This person
mhm,
is gambling with their reputation, their relationships, their who knows what.
mhm,
Mr. Groves is well known and well respected, and regardless of how anybody feels about it, his story is now out in the public eye. That is
mhm.
a risk. And when someone takes a risk to share this experience with you, I think we all know none of us are buying private islands off of doing this stuff.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that means something. That means
Mhm.
something deeply significant in my mind.
What else you got there, killer? So
I'm the killer. So I was, in your book, you talk about the LBL kind of being this place where there's this wide spectrum of paranormal, supernatural activity, that it's not just Dogman. There's other things going on out there. I know that you're a fan of John Keel. You said Mothman Prophecies was one of your first books that you ever had. John Keel talks about window areas. Do you think the LBL and this whole spectrum of paranormal activity, do you think that the LBL could be what Keel describes as a window area?
Absolutely. If that is a legitimate concept and not the result of coincidence, statistical overlap, people happening to be in one spot versus another spot. Yes, absolutely. It's either coincidence that we have Bigfoot, UFO, phantom light, ghost, mysterious disappearance, and Dogman sightings all in the same place, or it's not. Coincidence becomes much more difficult to factor in. I mean, you can't factor in coincidence. That's kind of how it works. But it becomes a lot more difficult to consider when you have point A, point B, point C. Suddenly you're up to 8 distinguishable separate phenomena that we do often see concentrated in different areas, but not necessarily in the same place. Texas is much the same way. We have all of that stuff and then some. But the LBL is a very small area compared to the
mhm.
entire state of Texas. It's the biggest state in the country outside of Alaska. So that's very interesting to me. Why are all these things happening in this one spot? I don't know the answer to that, but if there are window areas, if there is a super spectrum, and if all this stuff is coming from something beyond what we can perceive as reality, I think the answer has to be yes, in my opinion.
So we're going to go ahead and take some of these
Oh, heck
questions
yeah.
from the audience.
Love audience questions.
Let's see how unhinged this gets. All right.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Grizz asks, Aaron, have you ever had an experience that got you interested in Dogman? A personal experience, I'm assuming.
Personal, no. I've not had a sighting. I've not had an encounter. It became a very personal journey, running into all this stuff and seeing what I guess we can refer to as synchronicities overlapping while I was just looking into it as at first a hobby. But me personally, no, I have not experienced the phenomenon firsthand.
Yeah. All right. Bonnie Blue McGee says, do you have plans for another book on Dogman, or is there another cryptid you want to research and write about?
Yeah, that's fun. I think the curse of the writer is that you're always working on the next book before you finish the first one. So I definitely have some notes. There are definitely some lines of inquiry that I did not have time to explore in Hunting Grounds or the Dogman Triangle. They were things I was starting to try to wedge in, and I realized this needs more space. It also needs more time and needs more research. So short answer is I would like to do another one, but it's not happening yet. Another cryptid, man. So many people have done such great work, but I would really like to do more work on like local Texas legends.
Yeah.
We have some underappreciated stories down here that I think the paranormal community would really, really take to. La Lechuza. Google it, friends.
You're kind of the Dogman guy, though, man. So,
The Dogman
Guys,
guy.
you're the Dogman guy. So
It's
you
my
know.
bed. I got to lie in it. It's a pretty comfortable bed. I like it here. I'm not opposed to it, but yeah.
Well, there's one thing about the Dogman community. It's full of psychos.
But it,
we're nuts.
they, but you know, it's because we're field investigators. We take reports, but usually it's to kind of, we don't collect and examine the data to the degree that like you do at this point. And, you know, since, you know, we lost Linda Godfrey, God rest her soul, you know, there's been a lack of that. And it's just good to see somebody kind of take that mantle up and begin to
really chronicle
a
all
lot
of
of these
these
stuff, because you know the reports are still coming in. You know, they're still coming in, and unfortunately, you know, I take that back, because it's I was getting ready to say, unfortunately, it doesn't have the pedigree, you know, all, you know, pun intended there, that like Sasquatch does. But I think that's kind of changing over time. I think people are becoming more open to the idea that something's out there, you know.
I think so. Yeah, because we had this established body of work from people like Linda Godfrey, Rosemary Unguiley as well, did tremendous work on this subject. We have films like the ones that Seth produced, you know, and I was a huge fan of Seth and his work long before I worked for him. So you're going to hear me say stuff like that. I'm not required to do that as part of my contract, just the way it is. But, you know, we do have this established body of work that was set up. Oh, hey, Josh, I see Mr. Turner. Before it became more popular, you know, if we want to call it trendy, the trend is still building. The hashtags are still being added. Dogman Encounters, Dogman Research, Dogman Investigate. We're getting new ones all the time. But because we have enough data from before that became a real big thing, it at least kind of gives us a base to work from, you know. And I kind of, now that I'm thinking about this and saying it out loud, I guess I kind of started looking into the Dogman stuff as like well, if this is real, we need to actually look at it as something that we can frame in reality, and not just say 4 people killed in the 1980s by Dogman. Watch out for Dogman in the woods, you know, and that, which was, of course, the whole approach that we took with you guys on the documentary. So, but yeah, I guess it was kind of to thumb my nose up a little bit at some of and there's nobody in particular I can call out. It was just that I would, you know, I'm not about that. It was just the general tone of a lot of the conversation. I was like, this is getting so big and so outlandish so quickly, but there's something legitimate at the core here. At least that's what I felt in my gut.
That's what got us, is that the most forward-facing aspects of the phenomenon, when people first get it, they're outlandish. It's creepypasta. It's got a lot of style, but not a lot of substance to it. You know, I mean, and people don't even really try to look at the bare basics. Obviously, you can't confirm, you know, a lot of times that this event actually happened, but you can confirm some secondary data that goes along with it. And people weren't even really doing that. So that's why it's really good to see more people get into it and take a serious look to it, because it's a topic deserving of serious examination.
That's what really spurred us going to the LBL, is we needed to get out there and actually put eyes on the area and dig into this and actually see it and see if this is a possibility.
Yeah, because you hear these stories and you're like, this is dumb. I've been to campgrounds. Things like this don't happen. But then you go there and you see how isolated it is. And yeah, in the 1980s, there was no cell reception, but we're talking about a place in 2024 where there's still pretty much no cell reception. And you start to realize, like, I don't have to prove that this happened, because now that I've been here, I accept that it's possible. If this is a legitimate phenomenon, the location and the circumstances lend themselves to at least this type of encounter, this type of story. And that's, man, I don't have a conclusion to that, but man.
That sums it up perfectly.
Yeah.
Man, you know.
Man, dog.
Dog, man, dog. Dog man bites man. Dangerous Toys asks, Aaron, will you do a meet and greet in San Antonio?
Oh, I would love to. Yeah,
You've actually had a couple of people ask that.
You're hitting the big time, man.
Yeah,
you know,
shout out to my San Antonio fam. What's up, West Side? I would love to do that. I did a signing for the release of the Texas Dogman Triangle at the Twig bookstore downtown at the Pearl, and they have kind of let me know I can do another one. So if there are people who are interested, I was actually thinking about maybe doing something like that in September.
That would be really cool.
Keep an eye out. Now that people have asked, let's do it. Stay tuned.
Joe and I ought to come down to San Antonio.
You're gonna get mobbed like the
please.
Beatles, man, but it's gonna
You
be
can
like
put us
instead
on
of-
some cases. out
Please
there.
come down. Oh man, it'd be so much fun.
Now, if we go, we do have to go. Is that place Lulu's with the giant chicken fried steaks? Is that still open?
I think they closed.
No, tragedy.
I think they did close. I heard them mentioned on the radio recently as a casualty of the pandemic. Yeah.
Oh no.
But we got some good places. Yeah, no worries.
So Stephen Tichenel asks, Aaron, have you or anyone else compiled a national map of Dogman sightings?
Great question. And call to action, friends. I'm going to look at the camera for this one as well. The North American Dogman Research Project has done tremendous work here. They have an encounters map on their website that has proven indispensable to me. It was actually the inspiration that got me started on my first book, because I was able to pinpoint those other 2 sightings that correlated to my relative's sighting. The problem is not everyone goes to the NADP. Not all those encounters get added to the map. And there's a lot of great folks over there doing a lot of work. Kenny Thibodeau, Tom Kmetz, Shane Crisp. Shout out to all those guys, all colleagues and friends, and Jody Cook, of course. I think that goes without saying. But not all the data makes it there. So I made a map for Texas, which Jonathan Dodd illustrated and is behind me here. Other people have done maps. There is one in Linda Godfrey's book, Real Wolfmen, Encounters in Modern America. I'm probably getting the title wrong. I always get that one wrong. But I do not believe to date there is a comprehensive overview pinpointing every known sighting at current. I don't think there is a map that is being updated in real time as these reports come in. And the problem is, who can do that? Who control every forum and every comment thread and every YouTube video to keep up with that? Nobody can do that. You know, maybe we can program an AI to do that. That'd be kind of neat at some point. But at present, that data is not all compiled in one place, but I do think this is something that is needed. If we had a reporting database on par with MUFON or NUFORC or the BFRO, we would have something that we could work from. We would have something that we could start with and say, at least we have percentages. This percentage of reports are like this. This percentage are accompanied by evidence. This percentage are accompanied by evidence that we can't debunk, because that's very important. Not that I consider myself a debunker, but there's a lot of polluted evidence out there. You know, that would be tremendous, but it doesn't exist yet. So if anyone has the time, resources, manpower, and technical know-how to do that, hit me up, because I have a lot of ideas. No, I'm not going to do it. I have a 2-year-old.
You know, you see that to a great deal in the UFO community. They do a great job of doing that. Several different organizations. Lesser degree, you see that with Bigfoot. But yeah, like you said, Dogman, I think Dogman is just in its infancy right now. Not the creature itself, but just the serious study of it. With you getting more and more people to it and actually kind of crunching those numbers and crunching that data. Now, there was a lady from Great Britain. I'm sure you've heard of her, the Cloaked Hedgehog. She ran a site for
I've tried to
years.
get in touch with her many times and have not been successful, but
I think
she's a legend.
I think she stopped around 2023, late 2022, but that was probably the most comprehensive map, just because you could tell that she was just obsessive about it.
And that was early. Like that was you had a couple of Linda's books and that's it, but Cloaked Hedgehog was in the trenches. And that,
But
if you're listening, hit me up.
Having a resource like that, you know, that really gets you ahead in your research and what you're doing. It gives you a great starting point instead of being behind the 8 ball on it. You know, it's that information is already out there. And it's just easier to kind of get a starting point, and you can get further because you're not having to do all this, you know. Just compile all of that information.
That's one of our running themes with stuff, is that you're starting to see resources and money and people with the expertise, specialized expertise, really kind of take a close look at the UAP phenomenon. You're starting to have people like Gary Nolan and, you know, obviously Jacques Vallée's been around for forever and a day, but you're starting to see some other people with some real specialized skill sets and the resources to bring to bear, start to bring that on, you know, the UAP phenomenon. And I'm hoping you start to see that kind of span out a little bit. You know, one of the things I'm always interested in is, you know, they talk about how, you know, people who have these close UAP encounters, when you do an MRI on them, they've got an overconnectiveness of the, you know, the basal ganglia. Their brains are just wired differently than the average person on the street. And I'm like going, man, I'd love to see them start to bring that sort of stuff to bear for people that have had Dogman encounters, UFO, and, you know, obviously the UFO encounters, Sasquatch encounters, paranormal activity. And I think that, you know, this stuff's just in its infancy. You know, you're getting in on the ground floor, buddy. So, you know,
it's exciting. It's exciting.
Yeah,
I feel really I feel really fortunate, really lucky. And, the
Yeah.
people I've met along the way, the friends I've made, obviously
Mhm.
I'm talking about you guys. That alone is worth the journey. But being a part of
Yeah.
this very exciting discussion, it's a real privilege, man. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think this field really needs people like you, people who actually dig into
Yeah,
these
yeah.
topics and can express themselves in such a wonderful and complex way.
You're
you
kind
know?
of the spokesmodel for small town monsters nowadays.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? When you were talking about your role there earlier, I almost chimed in and went, "You're kind of the face of the company now." So,
I think I'm allowed to share this. My first film shoot with Seth was the Dogman Triangle, and we were chatting one night, and he was like, "I'd really like to just put other people in front of the camera. What do you think
Mhm.
about that?" I was like, "Oh, that sounds fun." And then 2 years later, he offered me a job. So yeah, it's been
Good deal.
it's been a great journey, man. It's ongoing. Yeah.
April Black had a comment here that I just want to throw up. If I can catch it with the chat moving so fast.
I know, right?
There we go. Well, hold on. Everybody, don't let anybody say anything
Maybe.
real quick while I can get this. Here we go. The show is starting to sound like Coast to Coast AM. That's a compliment.
Oh, thank
Oh.
you.
We
Ooh,
are
high
eternally
praise. Thank you,
grateful.
April.
It's funny because Aaron was on Coast to Coast AM
with
George
and it wasn't George Nori, it was George
Knapp.
Knapp.
Nothing against George Nori, but George Knapp, man,
I'm a George Knapp
We're
fan
big
girl.
I
George
talked to
Knapp fans.
George Knapp. Like,
I
what?
know, but we talked to Aaron online when he said that, and I was just like, "Hey, man, don't forget to drop the Hellbent Holler name." And he's like, "I got you, fam." And then we were actually coming back
from Brown Mountain Lights.
Yeah. And we signed up for Coast to Coast Insider just so we could listen to it because we were literally on top of the mountain with Alex Petikov when you were on there. We couldn't get a signal. We took a break for a bit and we were trying to get it. We couldn't get it.
Yeah.
So we're listening to it, and I was like, "Now listen, this is a big deal. Aaron's probably nervous as all get out.
I was.
If he doesn't mention us,
And it was
then
2 a.m.,
literally,
but-
you right as soon as you got in it, man, you were just like, well, Joe and Jesse with Hellbent Holler, we're screaming in the car,
going down the
banging
road.
on the dashboard. Our boy, that's our boy. So
Well, I mean, it's true, guys. I would not be in this position. I mean, there are so many people to thank. My wife was pregnant while I was writing the first book and filming the first documentary. There's so many people to thank, but straight up, I would not be here without you guys. Your
Yeah.
friendship and your support alone, but then the information, the witnesses you put me in touch with, and then just this continuing dialogue we get to have. That's not something I can do alone. It's not something I can do in a vacuum. So,
and it's so good that
I'm going to acknowledge you for that, for
it's
sure.
so good that's being fostered, man, because
Yeah.
everybody always focuses on the negative aspects of the greater community and the toxicity. And I'm always like, the best way to fix that is to make sure that really awesome people succeed. Thank you for that, Josh Turner. I don't know if you saw that.
Oh, awesome.
Thank you, Josh.
Yeah,
man.
shout out to Josh, man. Josh
Going in
Josh
the new
does a
camera
lot-
fund.
Josh does a lot of research, man. He's done a lot of work in this community as well.
Yeah.
Another one of my Texas bros. So
Josh actually said earlier that there is a get together.
Yeah, started that.
Oh
in
yes,
San Antonio on the 31st with
Of
Ryan Edwards, Ken
course.
Gerhard, and Rod Nichols.
Symposium of the Strange being put on by my boy Rod Nichols over at Bear
Mhm.
County Bigfoot. Ryan Edwards, Ken Gerhard, the legendary Ryan Edwards and Ken Gerhard. That is the 31st. I can't remember the name of the venue. I'm going to try to be there. I have another show that night. I'm going to try to be there. So yeah, if you're near San Antonio, hit that up.
Yeah.
They got to make sure they have extra security, though, just to keep all the plebes away from you, Aaron.
Yeah, because like I said, you do the meet and greet, you're going to get mobbed like the Beatles, but instead of it screaming teenagers, it's going to be like Dogman fans.
I mean, if me and Mr. Turner show up, it's just going to be overrun with Dogman people.
You guys ought to have a conversation because Josh puts a lot of thought into this as well. He takes a very intellectual viewpoint of this.
Yeah,
stuff.
he and I have. I hope I can say this. He and I have spoken on the phone a couple times. We've had some really, really equitable. That's a weird word to use. I have learned a lot from talking with him. So yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right, let's see what else we got here, man. So, what other comments or questions do you have from the?
I had one up here. Let's where we at? Dead air. That's where we're at. Somebody was asking. Here we go. Bonnie Blue McGee says, "Good movie Werewolves." Oh, could movie Werewolves cause the Tulpa effect, causing more sightings of Dogman? Movies putting it into people's minds, as it were.
If the Tulpa is a real phenomenon, I think that makes the most sense. If we're trying to look at this logically, it subverts and defies logic at every turn. Okay, so with that in mind, but the idea of a being that we can put out into the universe, through an altered consciousness or an altered state, or by sufficient belief in it, that idea would line up with a lot of these sightings. And actually, a lot of my research, especially for the first book, for the Texas Dogman Triangle was looking into what werewolf movies had come out at whatever year these reports were coming from, because I do think there's something to that idea, whether it's a tangible, physical, occurring phenomena, tulpa, or just something we're perceiving because it's in our minds. I don't know enough about that and the belief systems that it comes from to speak on it with any more authority than that. But if that is a concept that has reality to it, which I do think that's a possibility, that could very well be a plausible explanation for this stuff. Again, though, that takes us into a much broader conversation about the spiritual realm, human consciousness, our ability to interweave and manipulate those things together. And I just don't have the chops for it.
Cool. We're coming up on the hour now.
That was fast.
I know, right? We definitely have to do this again. I do have
please.
to say that.
Well, I need to
Because
get you guys on STM Live. So
absolutely. We'd love to. We'd love to. So, I just want to say that, and I mentioned this in the intro when I was introducing you. I'm just really excited about this new era. It feels like there's a dawn of a new era of cryptozoology. It's, we have people like you that really just work so hard and look into this very deeply and think about it very deeply. Joe and I go out in the woods and we go and really investigate these things and really put boots on the ground and, create these videos and really explore this. Small Town Monsters is doing a phenomenal job really bringing this to the forefront, but bringing it to the forefront in a really cool way.
Yeah, Small Town Monsters is probably the best force out there right now. No, probably about it. Just is the best force out there right now for normalizing these subjects, I think, with the greater population. I mean, we were joking because like on our smart TV, like one of the free channels that was just automatically set on
Alien Nation.
Every time we turn on our TV, it would come on Alien Nation. We're staring at Alex Petticoff's face. We literally texted him and just went, "Get off our TV, man." But it's getting out there and it's good, enjoyable content. It's exciting without being over sensationalized. And I just think that you guys are bringing just the reality of the subject to a lot of people. And you're so cross spectrum, the UFO stuff, Bigfoot stuff, the Dogman stuff. It's just, a lot of times people do this and they're so overly specialized that sometimes, if they experience data that falls outside of that very stringently set parameters that they have, they just ignore it or they change it to kind of fit what they're looking for. But with you guys, you guys are up for anything at that point. Yeah. So, it gives you the ability to take a more honest look at the phenomenon.
I like to think that, and that's what drew me to Small Town Monsters in the first place. That's why, I was and am such an admirer of Seth and how he approaches this stuff for all the reasons you just said. It was entertaining, it was escapism for me, but it was also deeply educational and at the end of the day, deeply human. These were no longer quick cut interviews with horror music stacked over them and cheesy recreations. These are people's stories, and you have a filmmaker who's telling them in the most honest way possible. Getting to be a part of that, dude, it's a huge honor. It's the promotion I've always wanted.
It's, you can almost like just feel the magic in the air with all of it,
Oh yeah, exactly.
And it really, it makes all of this more real. I know that, we watched Dogman Territory and, we're watching it and we're like, this is probably the best thing Seth has ever done, but we're watching it. It makes the LBL scary again. It brings the reality to the situation that these things are happening and they really affect people and they're still going on. And it brought that reality back to the subject. Yeah.
He did a tremendous job with it. Like I don't get paid by the download or anything, guys. I can't recommend enough that you check it out. All I did was stand in front of a camera and talk. Jesse and Joe did the research, took us to the location. Seth did the editing, and Shannon, of course, moves the whole thing. Everyone behind the scenes put forth such a tremendous effort.
Yeah.
It is such a good watch the way Seth edited it. And I feel weird saying that about something that I'm in, but he just killed it, man. He crushed it.
Yeah, absolutely. The cinematography is beautiful in it. It's just all around, it's a really, really excellent film. And it's available right now to stream on Amazon Prime. You could rent that or buy it. I prefer you buy it. So you
You'll want to watch it again.
Over and over again. Yes, absolutely. But you can check that out on Amazon Prime. Also, I have put the links to STM Publishing's page in the description, and I put it in the chat as well. You can purchase Aaron's books there, along with other STM publishing titles. And what else we got?
I think that's it, man.
think
The
that's
hour
it?
went by fast.
Yeah.
I'm telling you.
That was so fast, guys. I had
Yeah,
so
man.
much fun. Thank you. This was so much
Yeah.
fun.
You
Absolutely.
eased us into the interviewing aspect of Hell About Holly now.
Yeah.
Thank you. We'll be eternally grateful there. So, all right.
Anytime, bro.
So
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you guys for watching this special edition of Hellbent Holler Live. It is Friday, so we're going to wrap this up. Everybody wants to get some dinner and relax. So I hope everybody has a great weekend. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. Make sure that you go to the link below and purchase Aaron's books and read those, check those out, and make sure you watch Dogman Territory, Werewolves of the Land Between the Lakes on Amazon Prime. And you can actually order a DVD of the film from smalltownmonsters.com. So go and check that out. Really explore these subjects and make up your mind for yourself. And I think that's it. So I hope everybody has a awesome night, awesome weekend.
Aaron, thank you so much, man.
Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Aaron. for
We
joining
are
us.
eternally grateful there, man.
Highlight of my week. Thank you, guys.
Thank you guys, and have a good one.